A lot of people ask me, why would I build a house and not just buy one? A lot of people think they can't qualify or get approved to build a house because they need a ton of money. It is not necessarily true. Most people think that in their lifetime they're not going to be able to afford to build anything, but the reality is that it's a lot easier to build a house right now than it is to potentially buy a home, to even get into the real estate market. A lot of my clients who are waiting to get into the real estate market are pre-approved for 500,000-600,000 purchase price maximum. They have down payment saved up, but they are now struggling finding anything in Halifax within that price range. And not even Halifax, we're talking, 40 to 45 minutes outside the city. They're still struggling to find anything that's decent, that's at $500,000 or under. If you're looking at a house that's $500,000 or less within HRM, let's be realistic. You're looking at a fixer-upper. You're not even looking at anything that's new or remotely new. The house is old and needs a lot of work. It's cheaper now to build a brand new house for the same amount of money that you were to buy a house. Hi, my name is Helen Gonda. I'm a mortgage broker located in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I specialize in construction loans. I help people who are looking to build houses, and it is a fairly niche market. There is not that many specialists out there, and today I want to share tips and tricks and just kind of give you a general idea of what it's like to build a house versus just buying. A lot of people ask me, why would I build a house and not just buy one? A lot of people think they can't qualify or get approved to build a house because they need a ton of money. It is not necessarily true. So if you already own land and it's free and clear, meaning that you don't owe anything on it, there's no debt against the land, you could start building right away. We can use half of the equity in the land to start building and use that as down payment, meaning you don't actually have to come up with the cash. And there's other lenders out there that actually give you options to draw money from the land. So you actually get cash out to do your first stage of construction. Now, I specialize in draw construction loans. What that means is you're basically building a home in stages. So when you look at houses going up in your neighborhood, you're seeing a developer or builder, they're building houses. The houses are built in stages, and with a draw construction loan, after each stage of build, there is an appraisal. There's always inspections being done. So you're not seeing that end of things that I am. But once you start building the house yourself or you're going through a builder, you will get to see those things. So in general, a house is built in 3 to 4 to 5 stages. The general rule is once you own the land and the lot is cleared, you start with your foundation, septic, and well. Stage 2 is what we call weather tight. So it's the framing, the windows, the doors, the roof. Stage 3, you're looking at the interior. So plumbing, electrical, drywall, heating, cooling. And then stage 4 is usually, the kitchen, the aesthetic things, the toilets, the vanities, the sinks, sometimes the tiling. Sometimes it goes into stage 5. There could be a stage 5 of it. Some of the stages are broken up into smaller ones, but generally it's the 4 to 5 stages at most. I have seen it gone above 4 to 5 stages, but most banks don't want that. If that happens, there's usually some kind of an issue, like a shortage of materials or issues with the contractor or a builder. So when you're building a house, you have to look at it from that perspective of the house is done in stages. And how do you build a house? Where do you start? Who do you talk to? Why do you need to build a house versus buying a house? Can you afford to build a house? Most people think that in their lifetime, they're not going to be able to afford to build anything. But the reality is that it's a lot easier to build a house right now than it is to potentially buy a home, to even get into the real estate market. A lot of my clients who are waiting to get into the real estate market are pre-approved for 500,000-600,000 purchase price maximum. They have down payment saved up, but they are now struggling finding anything in Halifax within that price range. And not even Halifax, we're talking, 40 to 45 minutes outside the city. They're still struggling to find anything that's decent, that's at $500,000 or under. If you're looking at a house that's $500,000 or less within HRM, let's be realistic. You're looking at a fixer-upper. You're not even looking at anything that's new or remotely new. The house is old. It needs a lot of work. It's a starter home. Usually they're very small. You could potentially buy a brand new condo, but then you have condo fees and you're not really buying a house, and the bedrooms and bathrooms are limited. You can't really do any renovations to it. So you could potentially look into a condo, but most Nova Scotians that I know want a house with a yard, right? That's the dream. When you're buying and building a house, you have a house, a yard, you have some privacy for your kids, your pets. That's everybody's dream, everybody's ideal. Now, how do you get to that? I mean, you can build as a first-time home buyer. It just depends on what options are available to you for down payment, for flexibility, for timing. I have always told people that it really depends on the market. Does it make sense to build or does it make sense to buy? So during COVID, I did not think it was a good idea to build, simply because there was a supply shortage. There was a demand for workers, and they were raising their prices. And so the house pricing for new construction became ridiculously high very, very quickly. And the material and the labor costs just did not make sense. Now, after COVID, the material cost came down, the labor prices stabilized. And so it's still fairly expensive to build a home. However, it's cheaper now to build a brand new house for the same amount of money that you were to buy a house. So for, let's say, a 2,500 square foot home with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, if you were to build that yourself versus buy a brand new 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, already from a builder, freshly built, there's about a $200,000 to $300,000 price difference. And why that is because, first of all, when you're buying a brand new house from a builder, it's called turnkey. So you're buying a brand new home. It's just been built. It could have even been your design, your own plan, but you're buying it from the builder with the land. We call that turnkey construction. And so the builder usually ups their price for the home. So you're actually paying quite a bit more than what you thought you would be. Most builders charge between 15 to 25% to build on top of what it actually costs to build. Plus, the labor and the material cost could be potentially marked up as well, unless you're looking at and comparing to what actually materials cost and what the labor actually costs. You could be losing money on, them paying more for specific labor, for specific material, because that's what you requested, or just because you don't know what you're paying for. If all things are, fair, and they are not upcharging on market on anything else, on materials and labor is fair market, and they're only charging you a builder fee, which really and truly, a lot of the builders, they're mostly project managers. Some of them are carpenters. Some of them do have specialties. Some of them actually do build homes themselves. But a lot of the times, the bigger companies that you see out there that build homes, the builders are technically mostly project managers. So they charge you that 20% fee just to find workers, just to pay for labor, just to get the materials. They provide the building plans most of the time, and the material cost to you. And of course, when you're building a new home, you're also looking at HST. So there are some rebates available through the federal and provincial programs, depending on which province you're in. However, the rebate is very small on HST, and a lot of the times the purchase price includes HST, or calculates it in, and you will see it on the purchase and sales agreement. A lot of the times the builder says plus HST, or no, or HST included. So there's another fee on that, because you're paying 14% HST in this province for a brand new house. And that's something a lot of people don't take into account, or they don't think about. And so the cost to buy a brand new house, like I said, turnkey, meaning you're buying the land and the house already fully built and ready to move into, you're paying around 30% more than what the house is actually worth to build. Now, if you have your own land and you don't own anything on it, as I was saying previously, that is probably the best case scenario because you can start building right away. And there's different options for building. A lot of the times you will see people who are in the trades, people who are in the carpentry, who work in the trade, and they're blue collar workers. A lot of them actually do their own work, and we call that sweat equity. And you are really an ideal client for me if you have those capabilities, or you have friends and family who own businesses in the trades, who can help you and give you those discounts or give you sweat equity. Because when you go to a bank, they only allow you a certain percentage of sweat equity to be pulled. And again, sweat equity is you doing the work yourself, or you hiring out your family or your friends, and they're giving you a significant discount. We call that sweat equity in the business. And so when you use more than a certain percentage of sweat equity, the banks don't allow it. So you could have potentially gone to your bank and said, hey, I want to build a house. I have land, but I'm going to do a lot of it myself. Most banks do not like that. They don't want that. That is when you go to a broker. You're an ideal client for me if you want to save money and build it yourself, or project manage it yourself, meaning you're bypassing the builder. You don't need a builder. You need to work with an expert like myself who will help and guide you through the process of it. And you can hire out your own tradespeople. You can get the building plans from an architect or a draftsperson. You can go to Home Depot, Rona, Home Hardware to get the building plans and material cost. There's so many different options out there for you without paying that extra 15-20% to the builder for that work, because realistically you want to save money while building, and that is your greatest asset. Because if you save money with sweat equity, or if you save money by doing your own project management, or a combination of both, your construction cost is going to be significantly less. So let's say, for example, the same 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2,500 square foot house in materials is going to cost you around 150,000, and then in labor, let's say another 150,000. So you are building a $650,000 home for 300 grand. As soon as that house is finished building, you automatically have all that equity. You have access to that equity. And there is a lot of information about how we calculate that. So when we say, what is your house going to be worth when it's done being built? We take the material cost plus the labor cost plus the fair market value of what homes are selling for based on that design. So the square footage, the layout, the area, whether it's waterfront, not waterfront. We have a professional appraiser actually give us the number of what your house will be worth at completion. So a lot of the times, like I said, my favorite people to work with are people who are in the trade industry, people who have that sweat equity, or somebody who has land and knows how to project manage and wants to do it themselves. They save so much money and they're able to build their dream home for actually quite a bit cheaper than what they could buy an old home for right now in Halifax. The difficulty, and most people find this hard, is to find land. So they need a good realtor to help them find land, buy land. You can buy land without paying all the cash for it. That's a whole other conversation when buying land, because you do pay HST on land purchase. So you do have quite a bit of negotiating power. But I would say within 40 minutes of HRM travel, if you're not buying directly in the city, you could buy land for around $110,000, $120,000, maybe even less. You can negotiate that down. Right now, land is quite negotiable because you do have to have means to fund that. You cannot get a mortgage on land. You can get a land loan and combine that with your own down payment and still purchase land, and we could still start building, especially if you have access to that sweat equity. So there's so many different options that you can do. Just because you go to your bank and the bank says, I want to build a house and they say, no, sorry, you can't afford the land and we don't want to give you the land loan because then you don't have the money to start building and we don't want to use sweat equity, do not get discouraged, because this is where I come in. This is where I help you figure out a way to build a house, to build equity. And technically, when you're building a home, up until you can get an occupancy permit, and usually that's around 90 to 95% completion of the home, we consider that a construction loan. It's not really a mortgage. So we're really looking at a construction loan, and then once it's done being built, we flip it into a regular mortgage at regular interest rates as you were to buy a house. And at the end of the day, people get hung up on thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to cost me so much money to build. I need so much cash. You don't. I've had people build with zero cash. They've literally used access to a line of credit. They borrowed money from family. They pulled money out of the land that they own, and they were able to build, $600,000-$700,000 homes for almost nothing to start with, right? That is a huge opportunity for people who have access to this. And I have clients, like I was saying, who are first-time home buyers who have been looking for homes for years, and they're at a point now where they're buying land, or they're buying land from family, or they've inherited land and they're building because it's actually cheaper now for them to build. And a lot of these people are in the trade industry. I've had clients in the past who are really good at project managing, and along with myself, where we keep on track, we have receipts for everything. I help the client through the whole process up until it flips into a mortgage. And even after, we work together to project manage to save them that 20%. That is a huge saver for people to build. Imagine building your dream home, and by the time you're done building it, it's worth almost $1 million versus, you could never buy a house for $1 million because you need quite a significant down payment. But if you were to build it and project manage it yourself and buy the land, in a smart sense, and pay as little money as you can for the land and work your way through finding the best cost for materials and labor and building $1 million house for half the price, which is doable. You're building equity for yourself. You're growing your wealth. You're growing your wealth financially, right? If you have other debt by the end of the project, you can actually pull equity out of the house and pay out that debt. So like I was saying, if you are able to get a line of credit or a loan from family or somebody that's you're borrowing money from to build a house, you're thinking, how am I going to pay them back? Well, you have a ton of equity in your home now. You take that money out and you cover the line of credit with the draws that you're paying for. Once it converts into a mortgage, you can take that money out and pay out other debt. I've had people build houses and pay out their car and boat loans because they went and they bought a car or a boat or an RV while they were building. And then we looked at the interest rates on the car loan and we looked at the interest rates on the RV. And the boat loan, they're quite a bit higher than a mortgage. So we paid off all those loans and flipped it into the mortgage at a much lower interest rate. That person had a brand new house and all their toys that they wanted at a much lower interest rate. And they're quite happy, obviously. And now they're building a home for their mother because now they can afford to build a home for their family. So I think the key to building wealth and building a home is education and talking to somebody in the industry who is professional, who can help you with that and give you those options. Don't just go to your bank and say, I want to build, because a lot of the times you're going to get declined. Banks don't like construction loans unless you're a builder or developer, right? If you're a single person trying to build a house for yourself, you're not an ideal client for most banks. They don't want to deal with you. You have to have really good income, a ton of cash, a ton of down payment. Even some banks want you to get about 30 to 40% of the house complete before they even give you some money. I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. How do you come up with that? And so people think, oh my gosh, I can't build because it's going to cost me so much money. The reality is just not there. You can build a house. You don't have to have a ton of cash. There are so many different options that we could do to help you get to your dream home, from having as little as 50% of down payment for the land, really. And if you are, if you work in construction, or you're a blue collar worker, or you're good at project managing, or you want to take on that challenge, it's really the ideal person for me to work with, because you're going to use your sweat equity to build a house and is going to cost you less than half. And then when you flip it into a mortgage, you're basically living in a brand new house for half the cost that it would cost you to buy a new house, right? So I just want to say, talk to your mortgage broker, talk to your specialist. Not all mortgage brokers deal with construction loans. In my company, I'm the only one that does that. So most people that go to, even my broker partners, they get referred to me because I specialize in that. And with construction loans, it's not cut and dry, right? I have on my website at gondamortgages.com, I actually have a booklet for construction loans, just to give you an outline of different types of construction that you can do. I can sit in here, talk about this for hours, but the reality is every person's situation is different. And so when I custom tailor it to your specific situation, to your financial position, to what you can afford, to your timeline, because just because you can afford to build it doesn't mean that you're going to have the time to build within the same time frame, because you probably work full time. You probably work, Monday through Friday, especially if you are a tradesperson, right? So then you might only have the weekends or a certain time that you can take off work, or certain seasons that you can take off work. And of course, building a house is also seasonal. Most people do not build in winter for obvious reasons. It's hard to break ground, to do septic well, and foundation in winter, it's not ideal. There's a lot of issues that could happen. For example, the sinking of the ground or the foundation, because when the ground thaws, it's different than when you poured it originally, cracking, etc. Most people know this, right? And so construction season really begins in the spring. In Nova Scotia, really starts in around March, April, and then it goes up until almost December, depending on the weather. But I have seen it go into basically November and beginning of December, and then it kind of puts on hold up until the weather is nice again. And that's if you're doing the exterior work. If you're doing interior work, it doesn't matter. You could do that any time of year. But the timing, what I'm trying to say is that the timing is really important, right? So we put that together, a plan of how you build, how long it's going to take you to get each stage of construction done. Because remember, we're talking about, 4 to 5 stages, and each stage takes time. You book it with the professional, or you do it yourself. You have to know how long it's going to take you. You do need permits. You do need to have, possibly new home warranty, especially if you want your house to hold value, if you plan on selling your house within a certain time frame, or if you're building to resell. I do have clients who are investors, and instead of buying rental properties, they buy cheap land, they build a house, and then they resell it for profit, because they're doing the project management themselves. They're doing a lot of the work themselves. They make that 20 to 30% spread on the resale as any other big builder would do. They're just doing that independently. That is also something that people do. Another thing that people don't know that you can do with a construction loan is house flipping. So if you're buying a house that's not really mortgageable, it's in distressed state, it's called deferred maintenance, where the house is just not livable. You can get a construction loan for it. You can gut the house, and we would do the same stages. I had a lady in PEI who bought an old garage. It was like a mechanical shop, I believe, or storage shop, and she converted it into a house with a construction loan and is Airbnb-ing it. So there is a lot of possibility with that as well. Like I said, every situation is very different, and my job is to educate people and tell them, I don't say no to anybody. I really want to make sure we can get everything done for you that you want to get done, and walk you through the steps of how to get there.